Welcome to this week's UEN Capital Update video. I'm Margaret Buckton, your UEN Legislative Analyst. Our primary topics for this week: the governor signs the school funding bill, we have English language learner bills moving in both chambers, and school choice bills have now been introduced in the Iowa House. Let's start with funding. Governor Reynolds signed the SSA increase at 2.4%, plus $10 more was put on the base to close the district cost per pupil and state cost per pupil formula gap. That brings the increase to $179 per pupil, or $7,227 per student for the 21-22 school year. Now, you remember last week we talked about the one-time funding ideas for the instructional supplement. They're still in negotiations. The House has a $27.2 million allocation based on what I think is an extreme version of calendar counting, and the Senate is at $65 per pupil, except for Des Moines Public Schools. As they continue to work out those negotiations, just make sure you're talking to all legislators about having a fair per pupil distribution of that resource, because all districts had costs associated with COVID. Meanwhile, the March 5th funnel deadline is looming, where bills have to be out of their chamber of origin. They have to get out of their committee in their chamber of origin. Senate File 159, the governor's school choice overhaul, has already survived that funnel by being passed by the Senate over in the House Education Committee, but hasn't been assigned a subcommittee. And with the appearance of 3 school choice bills this week, we know the House is considering each policy separately. House File 228, diversity plans, also is a piece of that governor's plan that has survived the funnel and has been passed by the House and is sitting in the Senate Education Committee. It would be subject to the second funnel deadline of April 2nd. We also want to share the good news on the English language learner bills in both chambers. House File 605 is now on the House calendar, and Senate File 430 got through a good subcommittee today. It will be amended to match the House file. These bills divide students with limited English proficiency into 2 categories for purposes of generating supplementary weighting. One is intensive, which generates a weighting of 0.26, and the other is an intermediate level, which generates a weighting of a 0.21. Now, currently, 0.22 is the weighting for all students served in ELL programs, so this adjusts that in order to have the resources go where the needs are greater. Both student counts are based on test scores related to ELL proficiency, and there's an estimated increase of resources statewide, not much, $80,000, but getting the policy in place to then continue to work on this discrepancy. Well, the school choice had 3 bills introduced this week that come out of the governor's school choice bill. House Study Bill 240 had a subcommittee meeting today for education provisions and open enrollment. We divided this into 3 different areas, really. There are things we oppose, like the statewide student information data system. There's a $51 million expansion of tuition and textbook tax credits, which not only gives more money to private schools than it does to public schools this year, but because it's a reduction in state revenues, if we get about 43% of the state budget as public school funding, that's essentially a reduction of $22 million that would otherwise be available to fund public schools in the future. We have some suggestions that would make the bill better on provisions such as the open enrollment provisions for student athletes and for transportation of students who are below a certain poverty level out of the district. And then we support the expanded flexibility for an innovative program, and that also is accompanied by some flexibility to take ending balances from teacher salary supplement and teacher leadership and compensation and transfer those by board action to the flex account. So those provisions, if they were standalone, we would support. We always thought the school board was accountable for student achievement. That's the last division of the bill where they say school boards are accountable for student achievement. So we're okay with that too. We're currently registered opposed to the bill in its form now, but we expect to see some amendments. The other school choice bill is House Study Bill 243, which is the voucher bill. They're calling it education savings accounts, but it works like a voucher. It's the exact same language from the governor's school choice bill. You'll remember that this will apply to schools that have been designated on the list under ESSA as a school in need of comprehensive improvement and support. And it will apply to entering kindergartners, to students who have been in the school for 2 semesters, and any prior voucher recipients would also be eligible. So since that list changes every year, we would expect to see expansion across across the state as it moves from one school to another. The bill specifies which money follows the student. It's just over $5,000, but we know that districts lose on average $9,000 or more for every student that's not enrolled. It's important to keep up the advocacy this week with all House members. A subcommittee meeting as of this taping has not yet been scheduled, so check your weekly report to see if there is a date on that. It has to survive the March 5th funnel to move forward. The third bill is House Study Bill 242, Charter Schools. The bill creates two kinds of charters. The first one we do not oppose. That would be allowing a school board to work with the State Board of Education to have a charter school, and to, in exchange for some additional flexibility, relief of regulation, they would be able to be held accountable for student achievement outcomes. We would prefer that we build on Iowa's current charter school law more in that vein. The second kind of charter school we do oppose, and that would allow an outside entity, they call it a founding group, to create a charter school in your district without the approval of your school board. There are all kinds of reasons why this isn't good for our urban schools in particular. Check your weekly report for the latest talking points. Well, good news this week, now that SSA is done. It's well before budgets need to be certified. We can shift our focus to other things. Putting our support behind those English language learner bills with tiered weighting in both the House and Senate, and expecting those to move forward. And we can all focus on other opportunities like the virtual snow days and one-time instructional supplemental funding. Coming up next week, conversations on all of the school choice bills are imminent. They have to be done for those bills to clear the committee before the March 5th deadline. See your weekly report for additional details. So your advocacy action task list this week. Keep talking about the priority of public schools. Find a way to break through the noise, and there's still a lot of email and social media chatter that's getting to every legislator's inbox. So write a letter, leave a phone message, send a text, be respectful, and share one more thing you learned this week, and keep at it every week. And if you're tired of doing it yourself, you can be just as effective by delegating to somebody else in your district to carry that water. Focus also this week on our neediest populations. Talk about our English language learners students and our preschool investments, both of which save taxpayers future costs and prepare the workforce we need for Iowa's economic success. UEN resources to help. Check the new UEN website out. Don't forget to keep us informed of contacts and relationships that you and your team members are having with legislators. And special thank you to your UEN corporate sponsor, BoardWorks, for their support of UEN programs and services. You can find information about how they can help your district on the corporate sponsor page of the UEN website. And most of all, thank you for your advocacy efforts on behalf of the students in your school. We'll see you next week.